welcome. I'm Sasha Twining. Welcome to this event put together by the NGVA. And today we are looking at how to make the best use of renewable gases when it comes to transport, an issue which I know you find incredibly critical and very important to talk about now. Now, this event is sponsored by Rego Europe, Total Energies, Cittal Dispensing Technology, Dynex, Verbio and Zugneft Gas. Thank you for making us part of your day. Now, I want to be very clear, this is an interactive event. This is not a 2-hour webinar. I very much need you to be involved in setting the agenda for this. You've signed up to this event because you are part of the industry or you have an interest in this industry. So I would very much like to give you the opportunity now to set the agenda for the two discussion panels that we'll be having a little later on in this session. So to that end, I'm going to open up the chat function straight away. You will see the chat box just to the right of your screen. So we're going to concentrate on two different areas as we go through the afternoon. We're going to concentrate on technology and new inventions, and then also changing long-haul transport, that move there, the transformation of long-haul transport. So what are your opinions there? What are the areas that you would like our panelists to be talking about? I'll let you shape the agenda over the next couple of hours. If you recall, we have guests from the Commission, from Parliament, from the Dynex Group, Landi Renzo, Hexagon Composites, from Shell, Total Energies, DHL, Volvo and Westport Fuel Systems. So industries, regulators, innovators from right across the industry. So anything you want to find out from them, or maybe just to get their opinions on, this is your chance now to shape the agenda. That's all to come. Let's start the event properly now by welcoming Dr. Jens Andersen, the Secretary General of NGVA Europe, and also Dr. Tim Keller, the President of NGVA Europe. Gentlemen, it is very good to see you both there in your respective different studios there in Brussels. Lovely to see you. Jens, let me come to you first on this one. How can I put this? Decarbonising transport is critical. I mean, we can't underline that enough. It is across all the newspapers, across all the media. It is everything that everyone is talking about, particularly if we want to have any sort of stab at achieving the very ambitious EU climate targets and help Europe with this transition to a clean energy system. So how, where and why does the NGVA come into this? I mean, how are you going to help people achieve this task?
The NGVA Europe is active since many years, and I can tell you and the audience, also the predecessing organization, active since the late 90s, and we've been discussing the reduction of CO2 emissions already at times when this was not a big issue in public. This came up much later. And it's proven by many scientific studies, by scientists, that it really makes sense when dealing with hydrocarbons that to replace gasoline and diesel fuel by methane, and preferably renewable produced methane like biomethane. It might be also in future synthetic methane, and it's scientifically proven that we can even below, I would like to point this out once again, although there has been some discussion outside, but since 20 years scientists are telling us we can even go below zero. And in these times when we talk about the Paris 1.5 degrees Celsius target, we have to make use of every technology that's available. This is what we are promoting. There we are supporting our member companies, and the area here in the industry is as colorful as Europe. And we should really make use of this, of all these technologies that really make sense and bring a reduction regarding greenhouse gas emissions. And this is the task of NGVA Europe. And so far we have been pretty successful. And now we are looking ahead at the truck sector, where there is tremendous work to be done.
Absolutely. In fact, that truck sector and the long haul transport sector is something that we're going to be talking about in the second panel. So again, I would encourage you to use the chat function, maybe put your comments from anything that you've just heard Jens say as well, and we can use that to shape the agenda as we go through the afternoon. I want to keep this as interactive as possible. Tim, it is a crucial time. In just a few days from now, the headlines will be full of COP26 and the important decisions that may need to be taken. So if we just concentrate on Europe, where does Europe stand in this? Where do we stand? And there are so many tasks lying ahead, but I wonder whether you would outline what you see are the main ones.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sasha, and also from my side a warm welcome to Jens and of course to everyone who's out there, the numerous friends of G-Mobility and the NGVA which are listening today and watching today. And as Sasha said, I strongly want to encourage you as well to use this opportunity to come into a good dialogue with us to make this a true interactive experience. Coming to your question, Sasha, I, as a president, I'm very happy and glad to be president in such a changing time, such an exciting time for this association. Europe has made this big pledge to become the first climate neutral continent. This will certainly play a role also in the next days in COP26 in Glasgow. And of course, subsequently, Europe has decided on a number of different things that are affecting the CO2 footprint of different sectors, including the transport sector. As NGVA, we are certainly in the position to support these developments. We are strongly endorsing the targets that are being set by the EU, but we are also in the position to remind that we haven't seen too much of CO2 reduction over the last decades. Let's remind ourselves that we have a regulation in place on CO2 in the European Union that reaches back into the 90s. However, since 1990, no CO2 reduction really has happened in the transport sector, despite many different efforts. So we are very much interested and keen on understanding what the next steps will be. We certainly, with gas mobility, are able to provide solutions that will work on next Monday, not only in the next decade, but we can start reducing the CO2 emissions right away, something that we already prove with millions of cars on this planet in practice. So we have a system that is able to be operated, which saves money, which saves CO2. So that the CO2 targets, the ambitious targets that are set within the Fit for 55 package can be met. Today's program, I think, is perfectly set up for discussing these things. We will hear from a member of the parliament, from Barbara Thaler, what the view of the parliament is. And in particular, of course, we're very interested in understanding, and already see him on the screen, what the commission will tell us. Mr. Nunes de Almeida will give us some insights on what's coming up. And to finish, apart from being interactive, and I think that's something the first video showed, we should do these discussions with a positive mood, with a smile on our faces, because we're looking into a very interesting and innovative future. We can move things if we are adequately optimistic, which we certainly are as NGVA. Thank you.
I think that's a very interesting way of putting it, actually, in those three words that you used at the end: innovative, exciting, and I think energized as well you used, and trying to look positively, which is a good place to start, because I think, as you've both just outlined, there is a lot to do, a lot to accomplish, but also a lot of people very much looking forward to the future of what can be done. So please use the chat function and let's shape those conversations that we'll have over the next couple of hours. What do you think can be accomplished and the challenges that you see ahead? Now, very pleased that we will now start by hearing from the European Commission. And we have the Director for Mobility and Energy Intensive Industries from DG GROW. Please welcome Joaquim Nunes de Almeida. Joaquim, over to you.
Thank you very much. I hope I'll start with a smile on my face. and in a good atmosphere. So yes, I've been director for mobility and energy intensive industries since April this year. With the European Green Deal, the Commission announced its intention to make the EU the world's first climate neutral continent by 2050. And that ambition, together with the strengthened target of at least 55% net reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, is enshrined in EU legislation through the climate law. Transport sector has a key role to play to meet our climate targets. Transport emissions would have to decrease by 90% by 2050. And nearly all cars and vans on the road would have to be zero emission by that time. This is one of the key conclusions of the climate target plan, also reiterated in the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy. However, this is a challenge as road transport is the only sector where emissions have been increasing since 1990. And this is true especially with regard to emissions from heavy-duty vehicles, driven mainly by growing road transport demand and currently relying almost entirely on diesel fuel. Now, while road transport is responsible for approximately a fifth of total EU greenhouse gas emissions, heavy-duty vehicles produce about a quarter of CO2 emissions from road transport and 6% of the total EU greenhouse gases emissions alone. So again, a quarter of the CO2 emissions from road transport and 6% of the total EU greenhouse gas emissions alone. So a reduction of transport emissions has to accelerate, and transport must contribute to reaching our climate objectives more decisively. Natural gas vehicles have a role to play in this transition, especially when fueled with biomethane. In fact, our emission rules already cover natural gas vehicles and will continue to do so in the future. And we're happy that there are already several types of natural gas light and heavy-duty vehicles offered for sale in Europe, as well as more than 4,500 refilling stations. Turning on to Fit for 55. So in July, we proposed the Fit for 55 package to reach a 55% emissions reduction by 2030. This is our blueprint for a deep transformation of our economies and societies. We can only achieve our emissions reduction target by 2030 if we accelerate our efforts across all sectors of the economy. There are a number of different pieces of EU legislation relevant for the decarbonization of road transport. The package consists of a comprehensive set of interconnected proposals covering areas such as climate, energy, buildings, agriculture, and of course, transport. They represent a fully consistent and coherent balance between carbon pricing, targets, standards, and support measures to reach our increased ambitions. On CO2 standards for light-duty vehicles, the Commission proposal for more ambitious CO2 emissions targets for new cars and vans. Well, we have an average CO2 emission reduction as compared to 2021, which will be from 1st January 2030, 55% for cars and 50% for vans, as from the 1st of January 2035, 100% for cars and 100% for vans. This means that from 2035 onwards, all new cars and vans registered in the EU will need to be zero emission. The strengthened standards will contribute to reducing CO2 emissions of the sector, and it will also lead to cost savings for consumers over the vehicle lifetime for both first and second user. Less CO2 means less fuel spent. Now, do we have other relevant policy tools? Yes, we do. We've got the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Regulation, which will ensure that investments in the necessary recharging and refueling infrastructure will ramp up. And the goal is to install a sufficient number of points in all member states that are easy to access and use. We've got as well the proposed revisions of the emissions trading system, and the Renewable Energy Directive will also help decarbonize the power generation. The EU emission trading system remains a cornerstone of EU climate legislation in reducing emissions in a cost-effective manner. The Commission proposal aims to strengthen the existing ETS and apply emissions trading to new sectors, road transport and buildings, in which emission reductions remain a challenge. It will ensure a fair contribution across the whole economy while ensuring complementary pricing instruments to address the challenges linked to the decarbonization of these sectors. On renewables, the Commission proposes to increase the binding target of sources in the EU's energy mix to 40%, including the promotion of the uptake of renewable fuels with additional targets. To ensure that renewable and low-carbon fuels are put in the market, we proposed increasing the ambition levels of renewables in transport by, first, setting a 13% greenhouse gas intensity reduction target by 2030. Second, by increasing the sub-target for advanced biofuels from at least 0.2% in 2022 to 0.5% in 2025 and 2.2% in 2030. And thirdly, by introducing a 2.6% sub-target for renewable hydrogen and synthetic fuels. Now, turning to heavy-duty vehicle CO2 standards and their review. Nowadays, we count on a key policy tool to bring CO2 emissions down, the heavy-duty vehicle CO2 standards, a cost-effective instrument that channel investments into clean and innovative technologies, support the sector competitiveness, and offer economic benefits to consumers. We will propose a revision of the HDV heavy-duty vehicle CO2 standards by the end of 2022. A public consultation is expected to be launched by the end of the year. The level of ambition, and we would like to hear your views in that respect, the level of ambition of the standards as well as the incentives for zero and low emission vehicles, but also the role to be played by renewable and low carbon fuels will be analyzed with attention in the corresponding impact assessment, seeking how further CO2 emission reductions could be achieved in view of the increased climate ambition. Euro 7. So, rules for type approval of emissions from natural gas vehicles have always been an important part of our rule book and will continue to be so in the future, especially now that we're working on Euro 7. Euro 7 is another element of the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy and Zero Pollution Action Plan. Since 2018, we have been working diligently and inclusively with more than 250 experts in the Advisory Group on Vehicles Emission Standards, NGVA, to gain a broad understanding of what can be technically achieved in terms of emission reductions for cars, vans, buses, and lorries. We have launched 6 independent scientific studies for a total value of 6.75 million euro that increased our understanding of the problems and possible solutions. We're now finalizing our impact assessment, which uses the same predictions for the fleet as the Fit for 55 package. When considering the future legislation, we see there could be ample room for simplification of the rules. for rendering pollutant limits and testing conditions more demanding. And we would ensure that these limits are technology and fuel neutral, and that emissions performance could be guaranteed throughout the whole vehicle life. We know that technologies to achieve these results are largely available on the market already today, and it is obvious that vehicles fueled by natural gas, in preference by biogas, is one of the technology choices, in particular for the heavy-duty sector. In the scenarios underpinning the Fit for 55 package, we predict that around 8.7 million heavy-duty vehicles will be registered in the EU in 2050, or approximately 11% of the total HGV fleet running on biomethane or e-gas. For what concerns Euro 7, all these vehicles will have to respect the same rules as all other vehicles, technology neutrality, including limiting the most dangerous part of ultra-fine particles, i.e. those that are less than 23 nanomillimeters, and limiting fuel leaks that lead to methane emissions. So to sum up, in the coming years, we will see a significant transformation of the automotive sector, including in terms of environmental performance of vehicles. Electric vehicles will rapidly grow to be a large part of the vehicle fleet, but we believe that there's room for other fuels and technologies, such as natural gas, especially in the transition period from combustion to alternative powertrains. We trust that your collaboration with the automotive industry will ensure that natural gas vehicles are as clean as any other vehicle and have a place in the future. And you can always count on continuous exchange of ideas with us. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention.
Joachim, thank you very much. And actually, if I believe you are still there, let's just ask you a. Oh no, let's see if we can have a quick chat with Joachim, who I believe is still with us. Fantastic. Thank you very much for staying with us just for a moment. You very clearly laid out what you expect the industry to do. I wrote down on my piece of paper here, a focus on heavy duty vehicles. It is obvious that they must contribute to what you need to do in this sector. My question to you on behalf of the questions that we're getting online is, what can you do for the industry? And do you foresee a time when you will be classifying biogas vehicles as zero emission vehicles?
Well, what are we doing for industry? I mean, we're putting forward a pathway on mobility. We've done one already on tourism and another one on energy-intensive industries together with all stakeholders, member states, industry, NGOs, other stakeholders, get together and see what we could all together do to improve greening, digitalization, and resilience of the value chains, which is also a big issue right now. This is a process that we intend to start quite soon. As far as bio-originated gases are concerned, as I've said, I think we see a role for them, and we welcome their complementary participation in the effort of transforming the industries. We all know that it is harder to electrify heavy-duty vehicles than light-duty vehicles. Although talking to some automobile manufacturers, I mean, there are also interesting experiments towards electrification, also for heavy duty. I would say that the goal is decarbonization. Whatever technology serves to get there is a good thing, worth having a look at. It all depends on their affordability. So we're looking at everything with a lot of interest. What counts is the contribution to the reduction of emissions, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, just to go back to the very specific question that was asked online, I mean, classifying originating biogas vehicles as zero emission.
I don't know. I'll have to. I don't know the line of the Commission, if there is a line of the Commission yet, as far as that issue is concerned. I'd have to inform myself better before getting back to you. I can't reply to that specific question.
No, not to worry. I did notice also that you were saying that I don't think the word you used was consultations, but certainly conversations with the industry. I mean, how do you see those going forward? What's the biggest challenge that you see as you need to move forward in the way that you do? What might be the biggest sticking point?
Well, the biggest sticking point, I think, is the provision of affordable decarbonized energy to industry. That I would say, we've got industries are increasingly in a stranglehold between, on the one hand, the high carbon price, and on the other, the lack of enough decarbonized energy. And we have to make a massive effort in order to, prop up and deliver the decarbonized energy sources that European industry needs in order to survive and thrive.
I mean, do you see this almost as a fight for those resources, those, the actual material coming through?
Well, yes, there's that, but there's also a big administrative effort. I think that the technologies are already there. The question is how to make them affordable. But optimists, and we have to be optimists, all indicate that the more you use technologies, the more the prices go down. It's what happened in renewables. It's what people expect to happen on hydrogen too. But there's the issue of the scramble for resources. You're right. Most of the novel forms of energy provision or industrial processes require new materials and the refinery of new materials, and we haven't got enough of them. They exist, but they have to be exploited. But they can't be exploited tomorrow. You have to develop projects in order for them to happen. But also, the whole issue of permitting of all energy-related projects is a huge administrative bottleneck to make the whole thing work. So we have to accelerate much more all the projects we need to get all the energy sources, energy storage and energy transmission that we need to get our industry to keep working at affordable levels.
As you say, we will remain optimistic. That was the phrase that you... Thank
you very much. I think I could stay another 10 minutes with you. I'll have to leave you in a few seconds.
No, you're absolutely right. Joaquim Nunes de Almeida, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Bye.
And please do keep using the chat function to keep your questions coming in to shape the panels as we go through the next couple of hours. And indeed, let's turn now to our first discussion panel. And let me introduce the members for you of that panel. First of all, Barbara Thaler, member of the European Parliament. Barbara, hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. Member of the Transport Committee, been in Parliament since 2019. Prior to this, was an internet entrepreneur with more than 20 years experience in information technology, in tech. So Barbara, no doubt, will be drawing on your knowledge of that in this discussion as well. We also have with us today Dr. Andrina Moreno, Technical Manager at Gas Powertrain, the Dynex Group, currently responsible for Dynex's three-way catalysts for gas-powered engines, worked in this field for many years. Andrina, thank you very much for joining us. Also joining us on this discussion panel is Cristiano Musi, who's the Group CEO at Landi Renzo. It's a company based and listed in Italy, specialising in CNG and LPG transport. Cristiano actually has a legal background, also experience in finance before joining Landi Renzo. Good to see you, Cristiano. And finally, for this discussion panel, Eric Beepus, Senior Vice President, Global Sales and Marketing at Hexagon Agility. Over 20 years experience in the sector and different companies in different geographies as well. So Eric, will be interesting to see how your experience in different areas will play into this. Eric's responsible for Hexagon's global commercial activity in the near zero and zero emission clean fuel solution vehicle segment. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us for this first discussion panel. We're going to concentrate on technology and innovating for Fit for 55. It is a panel sponsored by Rego Europe. My first question to all of you, concentrating on innovation, I wonder whether, just briefly, if I go around the group, you could tell me what you feel is the most important piece of innovation that we already have, or that you hope to see sometime in the future. Barbara, would you like to start us off on that one?
Yes, for sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I think that, to be honest, one of the innovations we did a long time ago, and we should at least keep, is the combustion engine. I think this was a very good invention, and we should not pull this out of the market. It is about decarbonization of transport, which means it is about what we fill in, which kind of fuels we are using. So maybe you did not expect this answer with my IT background, but I think this was a very good invention.
I was almost expecting something rather digital and technical in that sort of way, Barbara. Adriana, what about you? A piece of innovation that is really driving things forward, or that has yet to be brought to market?
It answers actually both and follows up into Barbara's answer. I think the ICE is here to stay, and there's still plenty of things that can be improved. Innovations I would like to see are combustion improvements. Fuel is one thing, what you put into the engine, but how you combust that fuel and what comes out of that combustion process, there's still plenty to do there, as well as with the components that treat the gas that comes as a result of the combustion. I believe there's a long way of innovation to be done in the ICE and in all of the existing mechanisms to treat the exhaust that comes out of it.
Yeah, Cristiano, what about you?
Okay, so I think a couple of innovation. One is, let's say, biomethane. Today, we have a fuel that is carbon negative, and this is biomethane. For every kilo of biomethane we use in an internal combustion engine, we avoid 2 kilos of biomethane to go into the atmosphere. And the second, all the innovation to reduce the energy consumption of the powertrain. That could be electric powertrain, conventional powertrain, or hydrogen solution.
And Eric, would you agree with what's being said, or are you going to come up with something different?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of what everybody said already and what Cristiano said. You know, methane escaping into the atmosphere is 80 times more destructive to the ozone layer than CO2 is, albeit for a shorter period of time. So capturing that and burning that through a combustion engine is actually hugely beneficial. I think from an innovative standpoint, I think one of the things is the readily availableness of the biomethane today versus what it was 10 years ago. Joaquin said, you know, there's 4,500 natural gas filling stations that utilize biomethane to a certain extent in Europe. In North America, and I'll give California as an example, for the heavy-duty commercial vehicles that are on the road in California, 92% of the natural gas that they're using is renewable natural gas that is put into the grid and consumed in those vehicles. And across the United States, it's 53%. And that's really been a game changer. And we've seen fleets in North America really saying, this is our best chance to reduce our carbon footprint from now into the next decade. And we see them going very heavy on natural gas infrastructure, as well as natural gas heavy-duty vehicles.
Adriana, I think I saw you nodding at Eric's answer then.
Yes, it's nice to see how these cases pop up every now and then and show you the potential that this has. And when you couple that with the maturity that the technology has, this is not something that came. It's been developed over decades. You see then the potential of how bio-friendly produced fuel with the well-controlled engine. And I touch now on the electronic part. The improvements on the electronic controls also make the engine function in a better way. And all of this put together gives you a result that's already so good. I would like to see a wider implementation of this. to have this as a means to have an impact right next decade.
So what's holding back then? What needs to change? You say you need to see this having more of an impact. What's the challenge?
I think we need to put more effort into disseminating the message and backed up with facts. Yes, there's a lot of information going around on what this is and whether it works or not. And I think NGVA is one of the organisms that has really good facts and numbers to show the benefits, how things can be combined, circularity studies. We need to work much more in disseminating the message to get and show what the benefits are, the economic benefits as well, because this is something, as was mentioned earlier, that affordability is important too. We need to be able to have technologies that are affordable for a fleet operator that might be stretched on resources. So this is a valid option already now, and we have to make it more visible.
I mean, Barbara, would you agree that is a challenge?
Yes, it is, and I would like to add that at the moment the Fit for 55 package did not translate into concrete law or measures yet. So at the moment we are talking about general questions about big issues in the headlines, but we are not down to the earth and down to the legislation yet. So at the moment, the ones who are worried about the consequences, or those who show that there might be other solutions than battery electric vehicles, are disadvantaged. And without experiencing the downsides, the appreciation for the potential upsides of biogas or biofuels is also limited. And this is what I worry a little bit about. This is, I think, the discussion moment where we are in now. We are not into the deep details yet.
Why do you think that is the case? And what are the challenges then in actually getting to that deep discussion of the details that is needed?
Yeah, well, the Commission presented the Fit for 55 package in the midst of July, and in Parliament, we just a couple of days before we solved the issues of competences, which committee is in lead for which of the 12 legislations, and the decision of the Conference of Presidents was last week. So we can only start now in Parliament with our work on those 12 Fit for 55 package legislation. So we have to streamline all the legislative procedure. So the groups in the Parliament are now turning inwards to find common ground. So it's because we are just about to start.
And how do you think those discussions will go?
Well, this will not be an easy task, to be honest. The least common denominator will not do much good. So I cannot overstress how important this ongoing process to find common ground within Parliament is. It is very important. If I may use the Eurovignette as an example, because you mentioned long haul before, with the Eurovignette we have a decent legislative framework, an European framework, but the tailor-made derogation clauses on nearly every paragraph to have flexibility for member states is, sorry for being blunt, not good enough. And I think we really need to do it right, the legislation. We need to find common grounds. We need to have underlying principles. Otherwise we will have nice headlines, but no real legislation which really gives us the chance to fulfill the goals.
Sure, and it is the substance that need. Talk is great. but it is a substance. I promise we're going to shape this discussion through the chat function. So any of your opinions and your thoughts, do put them into the chat function just to the right-hand side of where you're watching this, and I'm going to bring them in. So straight away, question for all of you. What do we need, in your view, to make sure that the contribution and potential of gas vehicles to cut GHG emissions is recognised and further supported at EU level? So, where are the gaps? What else is needed just to make sure that the contribution and the potential is seen and understood? Christiana, do you want to start us off on that one?
Thank you, Sasha. So, I think that there are two topics. I think that, first of all, the technology using biomethane, natural gas, in the gaseous form or liquid form is ready. We work with almost all OEMs in Europe and worldwide on different solutions. And today, the performance of vehicles, LCV or truck running on biomethane is absolutely the same of any other technology. But it offers great advantage in terms of cost affordability and decarbonization of the transportation. I think, of course, we need to work on innovation, and this is what we are doing. And we are working on the two ways. One is having, let's say, we are very specialized in the feeding system, so from the regulation to the injection and the control. We are working on having more mechatronic components, so more electronic component to reduce the energy needed by the powertrain, and so to reduce, by the way, the emission. Whatever kind of energy you use, you are producing energy, so you are somehow emitting. The second one, innovation we are doing is the blending of biomethane with the green hydrogen. Because we also believe a lot in the future of hydrogen, and blending biomethane with green hydrogen, in our opinion, on internal combustion engine with the right technology solution help to reduce furthermore the emission. So we need to work on technology, and this is, let me say, our job and our challenge. At the same time, I do agree with Andreina. We need to communicate better that electrification is not the only one solution. Otherwise, we do the mistake that it was done in the past with only diesel and gasoline. In our vision, in the mobility of the future, there will be space for different technology based on the application. So let me say, the small vehicles for the city mobility, probably electrification is the best solution. When we think about LCV on the countryside, when we think about the long haul, we do believe that biomethane today, biomethane and hydrogen in the future is the best solution. So I think we have to do effort on technology and communication as well.
Okay, that's really interesting. I mean, Adrina, you were nodding throughout that. It's what you've already brought up. It's the communication, and that is what the question is asking. How do you ensure that it is recognised and it is talked about? Why is it not cutting through? What else? What more can you do?
Circumstance. We are in a phase of media where the attention is focused very tunnel-like into electrification, which, as Cristiano has mentioned, has a wealth of benefits and advantages, but it's not a silver bullet. It's not a solution that fits everything and everybody. So I think we need to get over the frenzy and open the conversation towards a more diversified future, a future that has room for technologies such as biomethane, biogas, e-fuels, hydrogen, electrification, even diesel. I mean, we have to be able to take the best out of every available technology that will cumulatively get us where we need to get. And we don't necessarily have to jump in a single bullet train to do that.
All right, Eric, how do you do it, though? How do you open that communication? How do you ensure that people listen to you when you say there are, all these different options and
institutional or company-based advocacy. NGVA is a great example of advocacy towards showing what this technology can do. Okay. But as a private citizen, as an employee of industry, to just disseminate the message. These days, you reach one person, you reach 1,000 with a tweet. I mean, it is as simple as that.
Is that the answer? Eric, let me ask you, do you need to get on social media more then and tweet about your company and what's going on? Is it as basic as that?
It really, if I look at, there's a two-part answer to that. The number one thing that I think that would help communicate the strength of biomethane and the story that natural gas has to play is getting away from looking at only tailpipe emissions and truly looking at well-to-wheel emissions. The positive greenhouse gas benefits that biomethane brings when you look at the well-to-wheel of a heavy-duty vehicle versus a heavy-duty vehicle powered off of electricity that could be from a coal-fired plant, massive benefits, factors of 5, 6, 7x. Even so, if you look at biomethane in the future, on par with potentially blue and green hydrogen with a blend of fossil natural gas. The second part of that is I want to talk about technology that Cristiano mentioned a little bit. And from a natural gas standpoint, whether it's running on pure biomethane or a blend or fossil, the technology is there. There's no reason to wait today. And Europe has done a fantastic job of putting natural gas infrastructure in place. And the OEMs have done a good job of having factory available natural gas solutions for heavy duty long haul. Iveco, Scania, Volvo all have in-depth platforms that are available for the fleet. And if you look globally at where natural gas is being adopted the most, it's the best kept secret is European truck. European heavy-duty truck will probably do 8,000 to 9,000 natural gas vehicles this year. And that's phenomenal growth considering it's only a 5, 6-year-old market for them. We're seeing Cummins come out with a 15-liter engine in North America, specifically focused on heavy-duty long-haul natural gas. Scania recently announced in Europe a 13-liter engine focusing on long-haul bus applications utilizing natural gas. So the OEMs know, and there's a white paper that was done by H2 Accelerate in collaboration with Iveco, Daimler, Shell back in August, which is fantastic. And it shows they were asked, forgetting about regulations, forgetting about Fit for 55, if you look at the available technology today and out into the future, the internal combustion engine doesn't die. It stays alive through 2050 because of that high energy consumption of that heavy duty long haul. So I would say the technology's there, the infrastructure is in place, the fuel is becoming cleaner every day from a natural gas perspective. And the question really to the fleet is why wait?
Okay.
And the TCO is there as well from a cost of ownership.
Okay. We will no doubt talk a lot more about that, those sort of innovations in long haul in our second panel a little later this afternoon. You mentioned well to wheel and the way that these are calculated. And actually, Barbara, as a question directly for you, actually, as a policy maker, how do you, or could you, or would you, or should you move from the way that you quantify these things? So you move from purely tailpipe to the well to wheel. I mean, how do you see? I saw you smile when we started talking about it. How do you change the focus? Should you, and when will it happen?
It was really good listening to all the my colleague speakers before. Cristiano said that we need to work on technology, that industry needs to work on technology, and the examples from Eric, really, I love to listen to that. To work on technology means that industry needs freedom, which means that legislation needs to be technology neutral. This is one of the underlying principles I mentioned before. What we really need is the principle of technology neutrality and life cycle measurements in all the upcoming files, in all the 12 files from the Fit for 55 package. And this is really difficult since the Commission operates with the tailpipe approach, which is obviously biased towards battery electric vehicles. So the main challenge will be to solve the measurement issue. And this is what what we try to do now within the legislation process within the European Parliament and together with the negotiations with Council and Commission later. So I think this is really the most important thing. And to be honest, there is existing legislation which gives the Commission an obligation to find measurements for life cycles. But I don't know why there is such a focus on the tailpipe approach. So this will be the turning point when it comes to the negotiations in Parliament together with Council and Commission later on. So this will do the trick, I think.
I mean, I'm sensing a little bit, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sensing a little bit of frustration in your voice with that one, Barbara. And I wonder how you see it panning out.
With having such a full load of work on our tables and long nights of trialogues in the upcoming months, maybe there is a little bit frustration, but I don't want to focus on the negative things.
Sure.
I think if we want to get this right, we have to fight in the negotiations. This is a usual process for politicians, and on the one issue it is easier, and on the other issue it is not so easy. I hope that in the end we will have a future-proof, technology-neutral legislation to reach our Green Deal goals.
Okay, well, we're talking about using technology and innovations to reach those green goals, driving down emissions. Let's look at what parts of the particular industry and in particular parts of technology and innovations where you feel there is more to do. I don't know whether that's something you're working on at the moment, or when you look across the whole industry, particularly focusing on the innovation and the technology. Cristiano, let me come to you first on that one. Where can you help more? What more can you do? What would you like to see?
Okay. No, thanks for the opportunity. As I said, we are working a lot. We have in our mobility group 700 employees worldwide, of which 100 in the R&D. And this gives you the idea on how important is innovation for us. So we are working on two ways. The first one is developing a filling system, so filling an injection system into the engine with a higher level of accuracy. So to help the OEM of having a more efficient engine, that means you need less energy. That could be hydrogen or it could be biomethane. But the fact that you need less energy, you avoid, somehow you avoid emission and you avoid the waste of energy. The second point, as I said, we are working on blending biomethane with the green hydrogen. And we think this is another very interesting technology because somehow it helps the bridge toward the hydrogen mobility that it will take time to build the infrastructure to have the green hydrogen. We also have a company, a group working on infrastructure, more precisely on the compression system for the hydrogen and natural gas refueling station. And in this case, we are working to have all oil-free compressor. So no oil in our technology on one side. On the other side, to avoid any kind of methane leakage along the system and to recover all the methane and to use the methane to have more efficient energy consumption. So, and we do see OEMs very collaborative on all of that and very involved.
Okay. Adriana, what about you? Where could the industry be doing more, concentrating more on technology and innovation? Maybe being very transparent and open, there's an area that you feel actually more R&D needs to go into.
Yes,
moment.
Indeed. After treatment has a long history on this industry, but for us, innovation is focused on very specific areas. One of them is cold start. Euro 7 is coming. The power threshold is going down to 10%. That means low exhaust temperatures. A catalyst needs heat to work. So getting a technology that can answer that, it takes a lot of our R&D resources. Then natural gas engines are intrinsically hot. Once they heat up, the heat is there to stay. So thermal durability is another aspect in which we put a lot of effort, because that gives durability and long-term life to your product. Poisoning tolerance is another issue. And I'm happy to hear from Cristiano that we're working on oil-free solutions, because this is a big threat for the after treatment. It's a problem that you can delay, but as of today, you cannot 100% prevent. So we're working on strategies to further that delay and to make the after treatment last longer.
Do you see sort of significant progress, particularly in the cold start and the other areas that?
Yes, and for us, this is a do or die, because we have to be legally compliant with the regulations. So this is for us a North Star, if you will, when it comes to planning the development for Euro 7.
Yeah. Okay, Eric, Adriana's being very open and transparent about actually where she feels more effort, more R&D, more focus needs to be, when it comes to technology and innovation. What about you? What do you think? I mean, and you've got experience in different geographies as well.
Yeah. So I think the piece that Cristiano hit on too is very important as well. It's collaborative, right? It's not just, a company, Hexagon, working in a silo to correct our product or refine our product. It's really working with the OEMs. It's working with the infrastructure facilitators to make sure that what we're designing is optimized for the particular application that's being used. And we spend a lot of time working on weight reduction. How can we take weight out of it? If we can take weight out of it, we consume less fuel. How can we make it more efficient from a fill standpoint? So that's working with infrastructure providers, as well as acquiring new technologies. Hexagon has done with our digital wave product to make sure that we can optimize the fill and make sure that if we have X amount of capacity, we're truly utilizing that for energy storage and delivering that to whatever the method of propulsion is, whether it be a fuel cell, whether it be an internal combustion engine. So a lot of work very collaboratively and openly with different partners in the industry is what we have done in the past, and we need to see more of that to ensure that from an infrastructure standpoint to the vehicle design standpoint to the energy storage, that it's harmonized. And at the end of the day, the fleet benefits from that. And there's an important thing too. All of this has to be affordable. There has to be a TCO for the fleet. If we have super expensive prototype activity, it's going to stay prototype activity. It's going to be deployed by the dozens or the hundreds. So we have to always be conscious that we have to take cost out of the product too. So the per energy unit stored, we have to have a path that says we are becoming more efficient in what we do financially as well, because that is an important piece of it if we truly want to impact mass deployment of the technology.
Okay, Barbara, let me come to you on this one. I mean, I know you're coming at this from a slightly different angle, slightly different context. But where do you think more focus on innovation or technology needs to be within the industry, just to ensure as well that you still have that wide spectrum of possible ways forward, so that there's a different solution, the right solution to many different scenarios?
Well, being an entrepreneur by myself, I think the role of industry should be the one industry is best in, and this is finding the most competitive solution in a given framework. And it is about to push the limits of our knowledge further outwards. So it is about R&D, yes. And when it comes to the relationship between politics and industry, I really can say that we as politicians, we have to do the framework.
Okay.
Because in order to allow the industry to play this role, finding the best and maybe cheapest possible solution, we must set the framework, which allows to explore all solutions.
Barbara, I just wonder actually whether I could ask you, because anyone who follows you on Twitter, by the way, would be under no illusion how much of a Formula One fan you are. Barbara is a massive Formula One fan, and I was just, wondering if we start looking at innovations and technology for the future and the role of gas in this, biogas in this. Would you ever see a biogas-powered Formula One car?
A very good question. I know that Formula One is actually having 5% biofuels in their cars, I think. So there is a lot of research going in this direction. But I'm not sure about biogas. I am so sorry. I have to tweet and ask, and let's see what the Formula One Twitter community is answering.
Interesting, but that would surely be a very, very good advert, wouldn't it? Very much so. Just a quick couple of words from you, Adriana, on the future. What you think maybe this time next year we're going to be talking about an innovation? Quick phrase.
Almost there.
Almost there. Okay. Yeah. We'll be almost there. We'll talk about cold starts. What about you, Cristiano?
Cold start, almost there.
Okay. Cristiano?
As Barbara said, push to the limit, and push the limit on the other side.
Okay, keep pushing. Eric, this time yet next year, what will we be saying?
I would say we are there, and I think this time next year we'll say we're surprised at the adoption we're seeing in Europe, especially on truck.
Okay, it would be good to know this time next year exactly what we are saying, and I like all your optimism. Thank you all very much, Adriana, Barbara, Christiana, and Eric. Thank you very much for joining us. Thanks for your time this afternoon. Good to see you.
Bye-bye.
Now, remember, keep your thoughts, your views, and your comments on the chat function. Is still open for you, and we have a panel on talking about transforming long-haul transport coming up in just a few minutes. So please feel free to put your comments and your opinions in there, and we will use them to shape the next debate. Before that, we have our keynote speech for this afternoon. Very pleased to say we can now discuss the mathematics of climate protection and which EU strategy should follow for the transport sector. Delighted to be joined now by Professor Dr. Thomas Willner from the Hamburg University of Applied Sciences. Thomas, over to you. Well, Thomas, I believe you might have your microphone still on mute.
Thanks a lot, Sasha. Yeah,
we can now hear you.
Yeah, you're right. Thanks a lot for your kind introduction, and thank you for the invitation to this very interesting and encouraging event. I welcome all of you. So I hope now that you can see the first slide. Is it correct?
Yes, we can see a slide, yes.
That's fine. Yeah. Yeah, what we're talking about global warming. Global warming is a matter of natural physics. Thus, we have to consider physical laws for climate protection. Unfortunately, as I obey the politics, is currently not doing this sufficiently by focusing on electrification for all sectors, including e-mobility, as we see. And so in this sense, I can support the panelists we have just heard and agree to them. And last but not least, we should remember that physical laws are not politically negotiable. On the next slide, we'll see the mathematics of climate protection derived from these physical laws. And here we are. The IPCC, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, gives us the data for the mathematics of climate protection. And here it is visualized. The data shown here are for the 1.5 degree target, as policymakers remain officially committed to this target. And the diagram shows the annual CO2 emissions over time in annual figures. The current level of global CO2 emissions is about 40 gigatons of CO2 every year. we see on the vertical axis in the diagram. The total CO2 budget, on the other hand, counted from the end of this year is about 260 gigatons of CO2. That is the maximum amount of CO2 we are allowed to release to the atmosphere for the 1.5 degree target, according to the IPCC. The area under each emission curve, what you see here is the CO2 budget consumed. Let's start with the discussion of the red-colored horizontal line in this diagram. I called it no action scenario. That is a scenario without any reduction of CO2. And thus, the budget is shrinking by 40 gigatons of CO2 every year. According to that, 260 divided by 40, that's only 6.5 years left until this CO2 budget is exhausted in this no action scenario. This is a very short time. And we're still, at the end, we're still the emission level of 40 gigatons per year. And nothing has been done. In the green scenario, on the other hand, I call it correct action scenario. We start with a CO2 reduction immediately. And in this linear reduction scenario, we would gain more time. We double the time. And we reach zero emission at the end, as you see. And the target year would be 2035 in this case. If we wait one more year with a reduction, with start of reduction, the target year of the green line will be 2034, 1 year earlier, comes toward us. Thus, if we wait 1 year, we lose 2 years for the green reduction line, and so on. By the way, the target year 2045 or 2050 of politics, we hear again and again, is not relevant anymore for the 1.5 degree target. We see the time left for climate protection is extremely short. Based on that, I defined 3 very simple climate protection measures, 3 criteria for climate protection measures that must be generally fulfilled. And the first one is no delay. I call it no delay. That means we have to start immediately. It doesn't make sense to install a measure for climate protection that starts in 5 or even more years later. And the second one is no greenhouse gas export. That means we have to look at the entire value chain. It doesn't make sense that we install a measure, we count it with zero emission in a certain land or sector, and this causes high CO2 emissions elsewhere, in other countries, for instance. And the third one, also very, very important, is fast rollout of successful technologies, as I must add, because the climate protection, as we all know, is a global task, and it can only be succeed in international cooperation. It succeeds internationally or not. Just as an example, the EU counts for only 9% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. And if the EU would be climate neutral immediately, right now, just as an hypothesis, would not even save these 9% of greenhouse gas emissions, because the only saving is the oil, coal, and gas we keep down the earth. We don't exploit. That means the only countries in the world who can do active climate protection are the exploiters of oil, coal, and gas, if they keep it down the earth. So what does it mean now for the road transport sector? These 3 criteria. Let's have a look at the no delay criterion. The alternative fuels, gaseous fuels, both gaseous fuels and liquids, would have an immediate effect in the large existing fleet, and we talk about 1.4 billion of cars. Unfortunately, the e-mobility has a huge delay of at least 5 and sometimes to 15 years delay, and no effect on the existing car fleet. And the exchange of the car fleet takes much too long. What's about no greenhouse gas export? In this case, alternative fuels have already a great performance, including biomethane. The average of all alternative fuels available in the market in Germany, just to take this example, is 83% of greenhouse gas reduction. That's a very good performance. So nearly no greenhouse gas export. Just the opposite in the e-mobility. There we have a huge greenhouse gas export. What is not counted here in Europe or in the transport sector, mainly for battery production and recycling, for building up new infrastructure, and of course for fossil power production for charging these cars. And what's about a fast rollout of successful technologies? Here we have a big chance with alternative fuels, especially with e-fuels, so-called e-fuels. If we export our renewable energy technology to countries with a surplus of renewable energy, and they can produce the green fuels and they can sell us the green fuels, then they have a good business with this on the long term. On the other hand, Germany and Europe, we have a very high demand of energy import. Germany has 70% of energy import, and the EU now it's 28 numbers, 58%, but it should be similar with the EU 27. So what is the conclusion? The conclusion is sustainable alternative fuels fulfill all of the three criteria for climate protection. And according to that, they must be promoted as a matter of priority. And the electric mobility does not fulfill any of the three criteria for this climate protection. And therefore, it should be ruled out as a medium-term climate protection measure. And that means the excessive one-sided promotion of electric mobility has to be stopped immediately. And we have a huge amount of studies on that, and all come to the same conclusion, at least regarding this huge delay. I want to mention especially the French economics study of 2020. They analyzed more than 80, it's a meta study, they analyzed more than 80 studies and came to the conclusion we have a delay, an average delay of 10 years at least. Now, what we are talking about, if we're talking about alternative fuels, today we are in a session for gaseous fuels, and they will play an important role. But I want to mention that we are talking about all of them, and we are talking about liquids and gases. And we need not only biodiversity, we also need technology diversity. And we'll talk about at least 5 groups of process of biofuels, alternative fuels, sorry. The first generation biofuels we all know, they're already in the market, including the biomethane from agricultural crops. The second generation biofuels, again, including gaseous variants such as hydrogen and biomethane from waste material and residues from different sources, agriculture, forestry, and so on. And the next one also important is the recycled carbon fuels from non-biogenic waste, such as plastics. We have a lot of plastics swimming in the ocean. It has to get back this, and it's a catastrophe for environment. And then we come to the electric fuels, the electricity-based fuels, the e-fuels or power-to-X fuels, again, including hydrogen and synthetic methane or ammonia and others from countries with a surplus of renewable energy already mentioned. And last but not least, the highly efficient combinations, intelligent combinations of these so-called hybrids. So it's, for instance, biomass or waste-based power-to-X fuels. Now, what is now about the EU strategy following from that. And I think there are a few points we should address. One is the EU should be interested in real physical climate protection by real global physical CO2 reduction. That means looking at this background, the scientific analysis background, we need a transfer of the financial support from e-mobility to alternative fuel technology and production. And again, want to emphasize all kinds of alternative fuels. And second is technology export is key. And I mean technology export for alternative fuels production. Then we start immediately with the international cooperation, what we need urgently, and we create many new jobs. The next point, very important, is we need import of green molecules from countries with a surplus of renewable energy instead of fossil resources. And I have already mentioned the high energy import demand of Germany and the EU. I think the second strategy point should be that the EU should be interested in this import of green molecules to meet the energy import demand. And if the molecules are here, then the most efficient use of the imported green molecules is non-electricity combustion systems such as ICEs, the internal combustion engines, and oil and gas heating systems. That means a ban on the ICEs would be a major strategic mistake. And the third one is the EU should be interested in supporting the automotive industry, sure. Let's have a look at China, the largest automotive market. China is relying on ICEs on the long term. China had focused on e-mobility in the past, but China has stopped this because China has recognized at least two things. The first is e-mobility doesn't help the climate. The second is e-mobility has a huge demand for raw materials, and China doesn't want to spoil its resources for e-mobility. I must say, China has clever strategists in politics, and I hope we will find some clever strategists in the EU politics also. And again, I must add the large territorial states and poorer countries, example would be Africa, South America also, and so on. They would stick to the ICEs also. And again, a ban on ICEs in the EU would be a major strategic mistake. Let's have a look at the raw material situation. In this case, we have a strong dependency on China already, but the EU should be interested in minimizing this. Therefore, the focus on the electrification of all sectors would be a major strategic mistake because it would maximize this dependency. And you can see here in the slide, the last report of the International Energy Agency showed very clearly all critical raw materials for electrification are dominated by China. And last but not least, the EU should minimize the risk of blackouts. And again, I must say the focus on all electric concepts would be a major strategic mistake due to the risk of extremely high peaks in the power consumption. And I'll give you one example. Maybe you've heard about that the UK has already banned the private charging of e-cars from March 2022 on in certain times during the day, between 8 and 11 a.m. and 4 and 10 p.m. And why? Due to increasing risk of blackout. The grids will get more and more fragile. What is the messages for the EU now from that? And what you're seeing is the focus on e-mobility and the ban of ICEs would be really a major strategic mistake. and alternative fuels must be set on the highest priority level. And we need all kinds of these, including the first generation. And the legal hurdles, we have already heard a little bit about that, that are the obstacles to investors have to be abolished. And the most important point is the fleet CO2 regulation system. That is really the biggest obstacle for investments and for the climate protection in the transport sector. And it simply contradicts physical laws, as battery electric vehicles are counted with zero emission, but renewable fuels do not count at all. That means if the fuel is 100% renewable, it wouldn't count. And that is absolutely nonsense for climate protection. So these regulation needs to be corrected. And we have already heard about the main problem. That's a tailpipe approach. We need at least the well-to-wheel, or better the cradle-to-cradle approach. And now I come to an end with a call to action to all of you and all of us. Yes, we have 5 groups of alternative fuels. The gaseous fuels will play an important role, but not the only one. And we need all effective options we have available for energy transition and for the transport sector. The e-mobility is definitely no effective option, as we have seen. And all stakeholders for alternative fuels should work together, please. That's a point that was not optimal in the past. And I would like to say, your enemies are not the potential competitor on the left side or on the right side. Maybe the enemy is what we have heard, the tailpipe approach. And that has to be corrected. And we have to fight for this all together. Thank you so much for your attention. And I thank you with this small joke.
Professor Willner, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for your contribution. Very good to see you. Thank you. And very clear messages there, underlying the need for speed, the need to roll out new technologies, and as that final point, all working together as well. Let's concentrate now on long haul. Our second discussion panel with Total Energies, it's the transformation of long haul transport, a heavy duty for Europe. So please welcome those to join this discussion panel. We have Dr. Jens Andersen, Secretary General of the NGVA. Good to see you there, Jens. More than 28 years experience in the automotive industry, 23 years experience in strategic and operational powertrain and vehicle projects. Also joining us, Johan Momberger, Business Development at BioLNG at Shell. Johan, thank you. Been at Shell since 1995, several leadership roles in business development, sales management and marketing. John Wilson is joining us for this discussion, Vice President at Gas Mobility from Total Energies. John responsible for the natural gas, renewable gas and hydrogen gas for mobility, as well as small-scale LNG for industry and activities within the broad energy company's marketing and services branch. Works on a global basis. Good to see you, John. Joining us from DHL, we have Katerina Razlova, who's the BU Director, Auto Mobility. Extensive experience working in the logistics, supply chain industry and transport area, and that's supply chain optimization. It'll be interesting to hear what that has channeled your views, maybe, Katerina, for the next panel. Also joining us, Lars Martinsen. Lars, Environment and Innovation Director at Volvo Trucks, responsible for the environment and innovation strategies and objectives. And actually, before that, some 7 years as the chairman of the Swedish network Climate Neutral Freight Transport. So a lot to draw on there, Lars. And Nadège Leclerc, Director and Market Development at Europe for Westport Fuel Systems. Nadesh, thank you very much for joining us. It's a company that works with manufacturers who are in turn working with light to heavy duty applications. So good to get your views as we go forward, talking about long haul transport and the transformation. And again, send us your views, your opinions on the chat function. And we can put all those to our panelists as we shape this discussion, because there is a lot to get through. And I think we've already outlined how tough a task this is, with indeed, particularly as we have heard from the last keynote speaker, not much time to do it in either. So Jens, let me start with you first. What's the biggest challenge that needs to be overcome? Where would you start us off?
Well, the biggest challenge that has to be overcome, this has already been mentioned earlier. We have to convince the legislation or the politicians in Brussels that just looking at the tailpipe emissions is not enough, because especially in the heavy-duty sector we won't be able to cover everything with all electric. This is physically not possible, and especially for long distances and heavy loads we have to make use of alternative fuels, and in this case especially biomethane. And very especially in its liquid state is the solution that will, from my perspective, and this is what many technicians and scientists are telling me, will have a strong future, and this brings also a strong contribution to carbon dioxide reduction. And it makes another challenge is to keep transportation costs low. This is also very important, and from my perspective the contribution of bio-LNG especially, but also bio-CNG, this depends on the country you are looking at. The possibilities are immense, and we should create the framework in Europe in that kind of way that we can make use of this technology. I think this is the challenge, or those are the challenges.
Okay, Lars, I saw you nodding there with Jens. I'm assuming that's a nod of agreement, but what do you want to add as the greatest challenge?
I think I can agree with Jens and many other things that have been said here today. I would say that the main challenge is what I think Professor Wilner was very clear on, that is the speed that is needed here. And in order to get that high speed, we of course need to take advantage of technologies that are available today, and also of course fuels that are available today. And we definitely believe that bio-LNG is an important part of the solution today and also in the future. So to us, it's very much a challenge to, let's say, make clear to our customers, make clear to other stakeholders, including many energy companies, that bio-LNG is also a long-term part of the puzzle. We need to continue to grow bio-LNG and sales of gas trucks.
So speed, I think, and moving quickly, and also convincing customers.
Yes.
Which actually was, communication and education was something that came out of the first panel as well. Nadesh, let's come to you on this one. I mean, would you agree with your fellow panelists, or is it something else you want to bring in?
Thank you, Sasha. Hi, everyone. Well, I would actually concur very much with what has been said. And to me, the challenge we have today is that what is actually the most cost-effective and practical low-carbon solutions that are already in use today, that are scaling up across Europe, are not sufficiently recognized by the legislation. And this is actually creating a risk to miss our carbon neutrality target, as it was said before, because we can't afford to wait for new technologies to be ready to be scaled and to be affordable. We really need all of them, including these great biomethane solutions that we have today.
Katarina, from your point of view, with your wider context, would you agree with that? That it is the regulation as well?
Well, yes, but not only. Let's say when we look at Europe, we have few countries. They, let's say, support and even subsidize the using of LNG, for example, or bio LNG a lot. But we have also countries where is no support at all. So, well, if we are talking about decarbonizing the fleet, and we talk specifically about NGV, like, then we, as a business, we have to select and really choose some particular areas or geographies where we implement these solution. And it's, let's say, in a kind of like when we compare it with the traditional fuel like diesel, I mean, the costs are higher, but sometimes where you have absolutely no support, the costs are too high. Yeah. So definitely, yeah, it has an influence.
So it's back to cost, but it's also back to the different geographies and the support that
as well. And and the support is, let's say, very fragmented across the different countries in Europe, which has an influence on implementing the fleet for the alternative fuel.
Which then has a direct influence, and it's really good to have you here with your experience. You know, coming from the standpoint that you can see that it is directly impacting on basically the vehicles that you go and buy, the ones that you put out on the road in different countries. John, what would you say to this?
I agree with pretty much everything that's been said so far. I think I would add in perhaps the certainty aspect, because to invest in this technology, whether it's trucks that Katarina will need to do or stations that we need to do, obviously we tend to be averse to investing in something that we don't see what the long-term outlook is. If we're investing in a network, as we have 200 something stations in NGV today. If we want to build that out, we want certainty that in 5, 10, 15 years, there's still a business behind it. Obviously, we think there is still a business behind it, and we've heard from everybody else that it really is the way today to drop your carbon emissions quickly. So some regulatory certainty that will be that this will be the case, that this will be taken into account in carbon counting is only going to help. It'll help people like DHL know that they'll get their money's worth from their trucks, and it'll help us service those trucks in building out our network.
The point you've just made, John, is an argument and an opinion that I've heard many times before. You need the certainty of what's going to happen, but it is possible to do. It always sounds to me it's a bit chicken and egg situation. It's almost, what comes first and who should almost, go forward first. Do you need the regulations for you to expand and to invest, the regulatory certainty, or could you not do that and therefore prove that it can be done and the success, and then have that regulated? Do you see where I'm coming from? I mean, it's almost pushing forward.
I think the chicken and the egg is that cycle's been broken. We've shown already, ourselves and our competitors and the clients who are using trucks, the OEMs, but it can and does work. What we do need to do is persuade more clients. The clients who are coming to us and saying, I have to become carbon neutral. Well, obviously, we're saying, well, here's your answer. It's biomethane. But again, there's this thing of, can I use that biomethane for 5, 10 years? If I buy my trucks today and tomorrow the European Commission says, oh, well, do you know what? We want to phase out the internal combustion engine, then we have an issue. And we've just heard from Professor Wilner that that's really not the way to go if we want to reach our climate targets.
Johan, let's hear from you. Where do you sit in this debate?
Yeah, I'm buying very much on the arguments shared before. Basically, what I'm currently seeing, and I had today a discussion with a customer like that as well, is there's a switch in the market in the customer perception from price buyers. No? So LNG was pretty attractive in specific countries towards decarbonizers. So it's not any longer the carriers taking the decisions, but basically the shippers. Yeah. So basically, companies like us with big transport requirements, and so all of those customers are usually looking straight forward to a European proposition. So therefore, when we talk about an offer with regards to bio-LNG, those customers are looking for a European proposition and not just a proposition from country to country. And that obviously has something to do with the legislation, rollout of biomethane, Europe-wide, and so on, to support this proposition.
And tell me more about your customers and the shippers and who it is that, not who, but what it is that they are looking for. I think you're suggesting they're looking for certainty. They're looking for their own measurements. And what are they? Who are your customers and what is it that they need?
Yeah, so the first thing they need to understand is if they are allowed in the future to transport their goods, for instance, when we talk about, let's take supermarkets, it's a good idea. We have supermarkets in our neighborhoods, yeah? And the question is, so the supermarkets are close by to our homes, isn't it? So the question is if they can supply, as we heard before, their products still to the supermarket. So that's their core question, their first question. No? And then the second question for them is how expensive is the change? Yeah, and what does it mean to my logistical processes? So what is the impact here? No, and usually they are looking forward to scalable solutions, which they can quickly basically convert within their logistical processes. Yeah.
Nadej, where do you want to stand on that one? I mean, do you agree with that? Is that what customers need?
Yes, talking about the end customers, the fleets.
Yeah,
I fully agree with that. I could summarize it with the idea that the fleets need practical solutions that deliver the performance they need in a cost-effective way. And today, biomethane trucks fulfill that very well already. As it was said, what is missing is more the right signal from the policies at European level that this is a solution not only very short term, but that it has a future. And I would like to add to that one thing, because looking at tomorrow and the solutions for tomorrow, today there's a lot of discussion about electrification, and as we have heard a little bit already, hydrogen is often seen as a new El Dorado to achieve zero tailpipe emissions with fuel cell vehicles. And actually, we believe that hydrogen internal combustion engines are also attractive particularly for this long haul segment. And why is it so interesting in light of this discussion? It's already because it's about internal combustion engines. It's not the end of internal combustion engines, and we see very exciting results with hydrogen internal combustion engines. But also, this has a lot of synergies with the current gas vehicles. So really playing with both and with all the solutions we have will help us better deliver more quickly on decarbonization. And I think that's really a way to fulfill tomorrow's needs as well as today's needs.
Jens, let's come back to you on that one. It can almost be summed up by keeping that sort of technological open mind and different solutions as well, different solutions for different areas.
As NGVA Europe, we are representing big truck manufacturers, but also component suppliers. And especially when I look at the truck business, although my roots are in the vehicle industry, let's take a look at a vehicle customer, passenger car manufacturer who manufactures 10 million vehicles per year. All over the globe on a bunch of really many locations. Compared to truck manufacturers, this is a totally different business. So in the passenger vehicle sector, you have facilities in certain areas of the globe, and in the truck business, where you then manufacture, let's say, some hundreds of thousands of trucks, there the situation is different. And we as Europe, we are an area of exporting products into the world, and we have to cover different necessities in each regions, and the requirements in South America and Brazil are totally different regarding transportation compared to Australia or compared to the United States. But the truck manufacturers I'm representing, they have to cover all these needs, and we won't come to the point that will have only one single propulsion solution. So we have to make use of what we have, and to a certain extent we are also importing our technology, and we need to keep our knowledge on level, and to also to develop our knowledge, our engineering knowledge further. And when it comes to synergies, what Nadej just mentioned, this is also a topic. There are many synergies on component side inside these European tech companies we had in the first panel. They are working on CNG, as well as on LPG, and as well as on hydrogen. And and for example, for the storage systems, there are strong synergies possible. And in the business, it's always about economies of scales. And when you have this possibility, then you can achieve something for the company, but also for Europe, for the industry in Europe.
Katarina, you're on the sharp end of this. You know, and you listen, I'm sure, sitting there to all these conversations going on of, you know, what the industry is saying, and you're on, it's not the other side, but you're in a slightly different context. How do you see this playing out? Which way do you feel the wind is blowing?
Well, I think, let's say, what fuel is going to be used in the future, I think it will be purpose-driven. Well, right now, the technologies available for the real use, like a real operation. So you can buy the truck, run it, and make some business with that. The only way you can do is a natural gas. But there is a total lack of, let's say, using a biogas. There are some, let's say, companies, they're using blended versions, but let's say really to get a biogas into the LNG trucks, it's hard. Yeah, we have several meetings with several companies. The market is a bit different than like the market with diesel. And when we look at the hydrogen, the AGV trucks using hydrogen for, let's say, wider use in a long haul transportation, it will take at least 5-6 years. Then you can really go and buy it and use it. Yeah. Well, when you look at the biogas, yes, it is a solution. But really, when we wanna look at the whole Europe, the investments into the, let's say, infrastructure and, let's say, distribution of a bio LNG, it is a question. But well, let's look at it like 7 years ago. I cannot imagine that. Now we run like almost 2 years LNG fleet. Yeah, so it's, yeah, right. And e-mobility and e-trucks and AGV, long haul perspective. And back to the hydrogen. Hydrogen had a quite good perspective for the long haul, because when we really look at a kilometer range, like 1,000 kilometers, it is something like we can use in the business. In comparison with e-trucks, so far 300, 200 kilometers, it will has its use in the cities, in the like a larger agglomeration around the cities and so on, for particular type of business. But for a long haul, right now, and with a perspective maybe 2-3 years, it's a question. Yeah, it's like distances like 600, 700, 1,000 kilometers. Yeah.
And that is what you need to be looking at, and that's what, yeah. And then that's where you're coming from. Lars, I saw a very thoughtful look on your face, an occasional nod, but thinking about it. I mean, the challenge also that Katharina is alluding to is the infrastructure as well, and it's everything else that plays into it. So where do you stand on that, on companies having to make decisions on, some of the areas that Katharina's just been talking about, and wondering how to work their way through?
I think if I share a couple of learnings that we have gotten from working with the Gasworks, I would say to start with, it's quite clear that we need to work close with our customers in order for them to, accept and understand new technologies, understand that they will still be profitable, and the performance and uptime will be there as well. And we also, of course, need to work very close to the energy companies, because we together need to, approach many of the customers, and also need to make sure that the infrastructure is in place at the same time as we are growing the volumes. But I would say the third key area that was mentioned briefly as well is that we also need to influence and work close together with the big transport buyers, because with them we can really also make sure that we have, a more long-term perspective. So the new thing here is really on one hand, there's new ways that we need to cooperate in order to grow this over time. On the other hand, we also need to understand, just like Katharina explained here, that the different technologies, different energies play different roles for different types of applications. I have to admit that from a Volvo Trucks perspective, we sell today 5 different electric truck models here in Europe and 1 from North America. And we expect that to grow a lot in the future. At the same time, we also expect our gas engines and our gas trucks to grow a lot going forward. But what we need to keep in mind at the same time is that what will decrease step by step every day going forward is the number of diesel engine and diesel trucks. So different types of applications and a tremendous growth, especially when it comes to electromobility, but also a big growth when it comes to gas trucks using energy from renewable sources.
Excellent. Where is your focus? Where do you see the biggest growth, and actually where do you need to see the biggest growth? Where does your attention need to be?
I would say that since it's quite clear that we need to move faster, I would say that the biggest growth is to start with needed in bio-LNG. Because as was said earlier, that initially many of our customers and our customers, they saw LNG as, a first step on the decarbonization journey with the benefits that can be achieved there, but also from a cost perspective. But going forward, bio-LNG is really the long-term solution that we need to aim for. And there we need to really demonstrate that there is a growth in that. Otherwise, I would say that there could be a hesitance in, going in that direction. So we really need to put focus on bio-LNG and grow the availability of bio-LNG.
Okay, we're nearly out of time, so I just want to do a quick round of all of you of what you really think the future is. So I think Lars, you've summed up where you feel it is for you. Johan was nodding as you were saying that, so let me come to you next, Johan. Where do you see the future specifically? Just if you can, cast your mind ahead 12 months and tell me where you believe you and Shell will be and what you will be doing and what you'll be focusing on 12 months from now. So this time next October.
Yeah, perfect. So the first thing is the offer with regards to infrastructure. As we heard before, in the meantime, we have already opened 40 LNG sites in 7 countries. That should double in 12 months. And I see the pace. So I'm not worried anymore for the infrastructure throughout Europe when it comes to LNG sites. I think the second step, we have done the first step, and in 2023, the second will be done with regards to bio-LNG. So bio-LNG first requires the biomethane and then the liquefaction. And the inauguration of the first plant, you might have witnessed last week, actually, in the Netherlands. The next one is to come in Germany, but that is not enough. There has to come much more. And basically, we have to debottleneck the biomethane and the liquefaction of the molecule, and that throughout Europe.
Okay, Nadej, let me come to you. 12 months from now, where would you like to be? And maybe keep in your mind the fact that we are trying to get to climate neutrality as well. So where would you like to be in 12 months?
Well, I would like to be looking at climate neutrality exactly. I would like to see regulations that get away from this tailpipe only consideration. And that means we will have regulations that really take us to carbon neutrality as we need, and that take into consideration that the solutions that have the lowest carbon abatement costs, like biomethane, need to be favored. And also, we talk a lot about zero emission vehicles, but we should also consider that there is a cost for these emissions, and we have done an analysis that shows that there is an extremely high cost of NOx abatement, for example, particularly for long-haul applications when you want to electrify rather than using, for example, biomethane internal combustion engines. So we have just completed this analysis, and I would very much like to see that in the regulations to have a policy that really enables the full portfolio of technologies that we need.
Okay, Katerina, to you, I know you're coming at this from a slightly different angle, but 12 months from now, thinking of climate neutrality, thinking of DHL, what would you like? What would you like to see?
Well, I can even say it's like what we're gonna do. Yeah, I mean, within a year, there will be definitely enhancing of a LNG fleet. I have to say that when I compared it when we started, the OEMs made a quite kind of development in a technical, let's say, solution, and the effectiveness of the engines is now much better. That's true. I wish that the bio LNG is really accessible, because it's not the case right now, and it's not accessible only in Western Europe. It's also accessible in Eastern Europe. Yeah, because there's a lot of flow in the transportation going from east to west. Yeah, so we should not forget this. And yeah, that's it.
Okay, we're just looking at the geography. It's a very interesting point. It's not just the range, but it's the geography, and it's the locations. Well, John, that perfectly leads us on to you. 12 months from now, and thinking of in the back of your mind, actually probably in the forefront of your mind, climate neutrality. What would you like to have accomplished?
We'd like to see also this regulatory certainty, particularly on the heavy-duty field, so that we can invest as we need to follow our clients like DHL, clients like other big transport and shipping companies. We'll be building out both CNG and LNG, and building on the investments that we've made in biomethane to, I would hope, to start looking at liquefaction projects for that, if not actually having them up and running.
Okay.
That on a Europe-wide basis.
John, thank you. Jens, just I know obviously you'll be talking more about this in just a moment about the way ahead, but just with your mind on long haul transport, what would you like to see in 12 months?
Clearly that we become a legislation framework that is looks at the CO2 emissions in total, well to wheel, and not at the tailpipe, and the European Union kicks off a campaign regarding investments in biomethane and also in propulsion systems running on natural gas and especially biomethane, so that there's a stable fundament that our industry can move forward and accelerate the decarbonization. As we heard it also from Professor Willner, speed is necessary. I'm not waiting for the nice solution in 10 years or so. This is what I would like to have.
Speed, very, very necessary, very, very much so, yeah. Very much at the forefront of everyone's minds. Okay, Jens, John, Katerina, Lars, Nadesh, and Johan, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for giving us some of your time this afternoon. It's good to hear all your views and your opinions. Thank you very much. And thank you as well for guiding those two debates with your thoughts and your opinions. Thank you for taking part and making this an interactive event with everyone's views and opinions and indeed questions being heard. Thank you very much to all my panelists and to our two keynote speakers as well. Just leaves me now to hand back to Jens Andersen and Tim Keller for your final thoughts, gentlemen.
Yes, maybe I start a little bit with a summary of our session, and I have to say the signals are promising. For example, I was, let me say, not astonished, but its strength. I had a certain strength in my. Or can I say it? Please apologize. I was positively surprised that there was a strong message that we should not give up on the internal combustion engine when it comes to alternative fuels, be it biomethane, be it a synthetic fuel, and be it hydrogen. I found this astonishing and encouraging and totally right, because the technology there, as we heard in our first panel, is nothing but at its end. There is much possible regarding optimization of components, regarding electrification, hybridization, as well as combustion technologies, that encourages me to say there is really much potential to achieve regarding carbon dioxide emissions, and we can do something for our industries here in Europe. This is one thing I would like to point out. Then Mrs. Thaler also said, and that encourages me as well, and it's very precious because she doesn't only have a root in politics but also in the industry. She is running a company, and she says, keep the solutions to the industry, but design a framework that the industry can develop, of course, with competition, the best possible solution for the use case. I find this also very interesting. Cristiano Musi also pointed out there is much possible on the electronic side. He is putting much effort into this with roughly 100 R&D engineers out of 700 employees in his medium-sized company. I think this should be pointed out as well. And also Eric from Hexagon pointed out that a well-to-wheel approach should really be implemented in order to make best use of all possible solutions we have here available in Europe, and we do not end with the technology we right now have. And also Mrs. Thaler pointed out that technological neutrality and life cycle emissions should be included in a set of frameworks by the European Union. I find this very encouraging and worth mentioning as well. And the signals from Professor Wilner were also pretty clear that it's also a matter of speed to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. And also when I look at, and this is just an addition, we did not discuss this today in these 2 hours, but when I look at recent news that come over the internet, that we will see electric vehicles being exported from Asia to Europe, I think it's really important that we try to strengthen areas in our industry where we really have an excellent knowledge, and we should not give up on technology where we are producing still world-class products. We are leading this industry, for example, with internal combustion engines. Nobody can compete with us, so we should take this into account as well. Well, this is my summary, and I'm really pleased that we had a big audience and interesting discussions and a very helpful lead by you, Sasha.
You're very welcome. A great selection of different views and opinions and different panelists as well, and lots of different things to take away from that, Tim.
Yeah, certainly. I would like to add 3 more points to Jens' summary. Firstly, I think it was quite encouraging to listen to Director Nunes de Almeida from the Commission. He invited us to participate in the upcoming discussions on the future regulation of the transport sector. I think that's very important and encouraging. Certainly, NGVA has to deliver and will deliver also in these very important discussions for us. Secondly, we did something that others are always asking us to do. We listened to the science. We were listening to Professor Willner, who gave us some insights and who gave us a clear indication that you cannot negotiate the laws of physics, which certainly gives us a lot of tailwind and which certainly also provides a lot of power to our arguments that certainly need to be conveyed to the Commission, particularly in the next year when we have to focus on the long-haul traffic, on the future of these kind of tractors, for instance, where we have to promote our case and make clear that we shouldn't only talk about a well-to-wheel, but that we shouldn't only talk about a tailpipe emission approach, but also to focus on a well-to-wheel approach, particularly in the long-haul sector, which accounts for a third of the CO2 emissions of the transport sector. And we have a very quickly revolving fleet. These kind of trucks are being replaced every 3 years. We can make a lot of progress towards the next target in the year 2030. Thirdly, in the panels, I think we have seen many very dedicated and knowledgeable people. I think this is the core asset of our industry, that we have so many people who are dedicated to their jobs, and have a very forward-looking attitude. I think this will certainly help and will make the difference when the cases which are and the files which are important to us will be negotiated next year. And of course, we have learned a lot of about the pragmatism that this industry can bring to the table. We have a running system. We have a proven technology. So when the policymakers start their negotiations in Glasgow next week on Monday, we can say we start reducing CO2 next Monday and not only talk about it. So that's a very encouraging perspective, and this should also keep a smile on our faces as we started with this very comprehensive conference that we have seen. Last but not least, thank you very much, Sasha, for taking us through these 2 hours. Very condensed and very helpful comments from your side. And of course, a big thank you, a big applause to Jens and his team to making this possible. That was a great event. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And if you allow, I would like to say once again thank you to our sponsors in these tough times. It's sometimes a little bit difficult. Yes, they are mentioned there. It's difficult. I know how the situation is in big companies to support associations. So a big thank you to our sponsors to make this thing happen here. And of course, this was for you, the audience, and I thank you very much for participating. And hope to see you soon on another event. And Sasha, excellent. What would happen if we would not have you to lead us through this meeting? Many thanks. This was excellent. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you all very much for your time, and thank you to all our panelists and everyone for giving their thoughts and their views. Just leaves me now to wish you all a very successful rest of your week, and indeed looking ahead to the weekend as well. Thanks for joining us today. Thank you.